Bear with me. I'm just going to get this recording. Cool. Good. Alrighty. So, welcome back to What's It Like To. I haven't been on this podcast for a while. I've let it slip, but here we are. Today's episode is about one question, and it's what's it actually like to go from injured to being an Ironman? Now, as a coach, I'm a bit guilty of showing only success, but what we miss in testimonials is like the journey, the frustrations, and actually what it takes to do something like this, especially if you're busy, you're a dad, and you've got other responsibilities. I am joined by someone who's lived the full experience, a client of mine, in fact, a sort of double client of mine, who rebuilt himself, ran a marathon, got a PB, and then sort of we decided to do the Ironman. Today we'll cover a little bit about his injury, a little bit about where he was when he started. We'll talk about the training, we'll talk about the nutrition, but most of all, the things I want to cover is what this actually looks like from a training perspective and what toll it has on your life and what you have to put into it to actually achieve a really good time in an Ironman. So my guest today is Simon Winchester, husband, dad, busy professional, and now an Ironman finisher. Simon, do you want to give a little brief intro to you, what you do, and yeah, we'll start with that, and then we'll get into the Ironman in a bit.
Well, it's a very, very nice intro already, Andy. So thank you. But yeah, good to be here. Thank you very much. I also thought you were going to open up with normally I only talk about successes. So today I'm going to talk about a failure, and here's Simon. So thought you were
Absolutely.
going to stitch me up a little bit there, but no. So yeah, on the back of what you said, I'm 40, turned 40 this year. That was a big motivator for why I did the things that we're going to talk about. As you say, I'm a dad. I've got two girls, 5-year-old and 2-year-old. So that's a lot of time and effort and fun. And then I work kind of in sales, tech, uh, quite high pressured, long hours, stressful environment. And so along with being a husband and hopefully a friend and a son, etc. Lots of plates spinning, and yeah, I find myself running around a lot, both on purpose and just with life. So that's probably me in a nutshell.
And what was it way back when that sort of made you reach out?
Yeah, it's funny because as you say, you were my PT coach, mentor, whatever you want to call it, back before COVID. And so we were working together, it was like 2019. And it was then actually I had kind of I've always had the desire to do an Ironman, but in the back of my mind there, it was kind of like building strength to probably try and do an Ironman at some point. And then COVID came along. And obviously we didn't see each other for a number of years. And from there, I went, from PT with you to having two kids before I saw you again, and life had moved on. The reason I kind of called you up again was I got injured overdoing it a little bit, and I just kind of got fed up of having a constant niggle that seemed to have kind of increased into something that was preventing me from actually properly training. And as I said, I was coming up to my 40th birthday, and I just generally wasn't particularly happy with where I was, and I knew a man that could help me.
Can you remember our first meeting? And can you remember what you were eating on our first meeting?
As in when we
This second
restarted.
time round.
Yeah, so that would have been around about April, I think, 2024. So, oh no, is it maybe 2023 now? I can't
Uh,
remember.
God, don't test me on dates.
I think it was, yeah, April 2024. So it's been about 18 months. What was I eating? I do not remember what I was eating. Probably a pizza or something.
No, I can remember, so I can distinctly remember you were sat there with a pack of Pringles, salt and vinegar Pringles. You said
Yeah,
this was your thing at the moment. And you
yeah.
stood up and you showed me you showed me your belly fat, which look, to most people would have been nothing because you're a lean guy, you're obviously a fit guy. But that was I could just remember you sitting there eating Pringles saying, look, I'm stuck in this injury cycle. I'm not eating particularly well. I'm not exactly where I want to be. And look, you're in good shape. you genetically you're in good shape as well, but you were obviously a little bit out, a bit out of shape. But
Yeah,
what
I
sort of
remember now.
just to to explain to people listening, what I do essentially is trying to find out what the actual problem is, or like what's going on in the background to cause these things. And when I spoke to you again, we went through your injury history, and it was pretty huge, really. Repetitive groin strains, your calves and hammies were bad, your right knee was bad from a marathon. Um, you were very conscious of your right knee. Anything we tried to do in the testing, your back was kicking in. I don't know if you can remember our first test.
Yeah,
Now, look, I don't want to tell people how to do things, but I suppose just as a point of reference, I find injury history the most interesting part of like the journey with people. And your injury history just threw up so many things that we sort of had to unpick over time. And I think if anyone's looking to, if anyone is struggling with old injuries and they've been going through this sort of injury cycle over time, if someone you speak to is not looking back at your history and saying, well, this has happened, this has happened, this has happened, this has happened, and actually having a deep dive into that, then you're probably never going to solve the problem. Because actually, when we started, I mean, it was nowhere near an Ironman, was it? It was sort of basic rehab, get you back strong and get you back running pain free, essentially.
yeah. I mean, it was worse than that. I had no gym membership. I couldn't really train. Um, I don't want to exaggerate because again, as you say, I had a good level of general fitness my whole life, and the reason I kind of hit that peak injury was we started in April 24. In October 23, I did a 50-mile ultra, just kind of randomly with a friend with not a huge amount of training. And that's when my calf had really gone. And so I had basically got to the fitness of being able to do a 50-mile ultra in October and then zero all the way through to April 24. And so for me, I was in really bad shape, and I hadn't lifted a weight in about 6 years, so I had no muscle. And yeah, by the way, I have literally just finished a packet of salt and vinegar crisps before I got on this call, so
Oh,
I'm
good.
still
So
doing
some
well.
things haven't changed, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, and so yeah, I was really at the bottom of the barrel for me, and not really in a position to be able to train, and I didn't have a gym membership. Um, and I think to your kind of question, that long list of injuries has always sort of been there, and not all at once, but they've always kind of like come and gone. And the story I've always been told throughout my life, I did a lot of athletics, cross country, football, rugby, etc. when I was a kid at school, and I'd have growing pains, groin injuries, and the physios and the sports massages, they all said the same thing: you do not stretch enough, you are not treating your body particularly well, you're turning up, you're doing an activity, and you're going. And if you do not treat your body well, if you do not build up the right muscles, if you do not stretch, afterwards and warm down correctly, you're going to have problems in your later life. And I kind of unfortunately didn't pay that much attention. And throughout my life, I just kind of ignored all of the niggles really, and not really set myself up in the right way, um, or really protected myself in terms of warming up, warming down. And so inevitably, at some point, it was all going to come crashing down. And it was about 18 months ago when that really actually happened.
And then there was another thing that you had to do just after we started the dreaded 100-mile walk. Can you remember that?
Yeah. So it was actually, so every year for the last 4 years, I've done a 100-mile charity walk where we walk 100 miles in 3 days. So it's about 12 to be honest, it can be 12 to 19 hours per day that you're on your feet, because it's typically a tough course, and we're doing it for one of my good friends' charities. It's called Rally Round Rupert, and it's in honor of his son, really, who's fighting fit but has SMA, which is a spinal muscular atrophy. It's a very kind of rare uh, motor neuron disease, and we're raising money for their charity in order to help clinical trials and supporting families with children that have SMA. And so every year we do this walk. And actually, it was summer 2024. I did one, and that led to doing the ultra marathon, which led to me being injured, which then led to us starting together. And yeah, the first thing I said was, by the way, I've got to do a charity walk,
Yeah.
100 miles in a couple of months, and I can barely stand up.
And yes, the cast didn't like that very much, did they?
No.
No, no.
The calf was the big problem. Knee's always been a bit of an issue on the right side, but the left calf was what really sent me into physio and calling you up.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Um, cool. All right. Well, let's get into, you know, your your training. All right. Now, I don't want to talk too much about what I did, but how much time a week did you have to spend? Can you remember what you said to me when we talked about timings per week?
Yeah. Um, the cliche term is time poor. So, I didn't have a lot of time to train during the week because I'm working and I've got a family, so I'm trying to minimize time away. I travel quite a bit with work. And so ultimately, when it gets to the weekend, the last thing I want to do, or my family want me to do particularly, is disappear for 6, 7 hours and do long training sessions. And so when we agreed that we were going to start training or building a plan for the Ironman, it was very much, look, can you please help me? I want the weekly sessions to be the length of essentially like a normal workout, a normal 10K run timing or a normal gym session timing. So, around about an hour, three-ish times a week. And then I know that we're going to have to ramp up the time and the distance across the weekends, or just, for a certain amount of sessions as we get closer to the event. But we're going to have to try and drop them into the week where possible, or minimize, double sessions at the weekend. So very much shoehorning it into a busy schedule with the least amount of training,
Yeah,
essentially.
that's exactly what you said to me. But how can
Yeah.
we do this with the absolute least amount of training? And I think that I just want to caveat that quickly. Like, you're a fit guy, so you have a very good base to do this stuff. I think what we probably need to get across as well is that if you don't have that base, you're probably not going to be able to do it on as little training as you did. And it was also a little bit of we had to discuss it as time went on, right? So, you would go to your wife and your family and say, on these dates, I might be gone for a few hours. And that was sort of how we worked it, wasn't it? It was right, I can probably do some more time this day, and if anything, if you had some time on a work day, then we could sort of crowbar it in there. But essentially, it was very much if we can, especially in the build up sort of to the marathon. Really, it was once once every month, and then slightly more often as time got a little bit closer to the marathon. But actually, we were trying to minimize that amount of time out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's probably the first piece of advice I would try and give people, if you're in a family or busy, is that communication. And so it was very critical to minimize stress. And by talking to my wife and saying, look, I've always wanted to do this thing. I'm finally going to do it. It is going to disrupt our life a little bit. I'm going to try and minimize that as much as possible, but I cannot take it away. So let's just try and plan our life, and I'll do my best to squeeze it in. But honestly, I just need you to kind of accept and hopefully support that I am going to do this and it is going to be a bit of a drain. My wife is incredibly athletic. She's a better athlete than I am. She's better than me in most things, all things, to be honest. And she
Yeah,
was
that is.
incredibly supportive, which made it a lot easier. And I think part of that is I'll probably have to repay the favor, and she'll be doing the Ironman next, and I'll be looking after the kids. But yeah, first piece of advice would be communication, planning your life to not cause unnecessary stress. The other thing, which not everybody's lucky enough to have, is I had you. And so when I, messaged you, called you up, whatever, and said, look, I know that you set this plan for the week, but I'm now doing X, so the whole plan is shot. Can you rework it? I think I've got a window where on a random Wednesday, I'll be able to find 5 hours. You would rework the schedule, and I would do a 5 hour training session on Wednesday and make up, all the other sessions throughout the week. And for me, like everyone's different, but my brain is I just need to be told what to do, and I will do it. And if I had to kind of plan that myself, there's no way I would, you would have done the whole, oh, I'll just skip the 5 hour session this week and I'll make it up another time. And that's where the difference, I think, comes in from, the result at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And look, so moving. I mean, look, I think that's the biggest issue people have got, right? It's you need to be told you don't have the capacity to think. You're very busy. If you're traveling, it's just not there. And that's what I hear all the time. It's like, just tell me what to do and I'll go and do it. And it takes all the thinking out of it. And I suppose there's a little bit of accountability there as well. So let's move on to the marathon. So we sort of it was under 3 was a bit of a stretch goal, right?
Yeah, so for context, we were talking originally. So April 24, we started talking, and then I was like, look, I want to do the Ironman in August 2025, and that's what we were working towards, but we were a long way away. When I had got that spot in the Ironman in August 2025, it was kind of autumn 24. I'd applied for the London ballot, and as always, didn't get the slot, but then managed to get a charity spot. So it's like, okay, all of a sudden, I had the London Marathon in April 2025. And so if we were training towards that, by April, I would have been marathon fit. And then from April to August, I can, work on the other stuff. And so, yeah, the main goal was the goal number one was the Ironman. And then quickly, goal number two materialized, which is, oh, I'm doing the London Marathon. Maybe I could try and do a sub 3 hour marathon, having only ever done one other marathon 12 years earlier and got 3:25. So yeah, that was the second goal.
Yeah, I mean, my spreadsheet was ruined when you told me about the marathon. I was like, oh God. Anyway,
Yeah.
but actually, it sort of makes it a bit more fun, and actually, it sort of makes it a little bit more of a challenge sometimes, just to rejig it and work out what was going on. But I mean, the week before the marathon, and we'll talk a little bit about nutrition and stuff in a minute, but the week before the marathon wasn't the best prep for you, was it?
No, again, life gets in the way. And so I was in San Francisco for work the week leading up, and um, I flew back Friday, landed Saturday morning, and then the marathon was on Sunday. And so, suffering a little bit from jet lag, poor preparation, poor sleep leading up to it, poor nutrition because I was at work and going out for dinners and lunches and stuff like that. So, yeah, it wasn't the best prep. However, there were two benefits from it. One, uh, it was warmer in California than it was in London. And so I did a couple of those last minute, loosener runs, but in warmer conditions and was just generally living in hotter climate, which turned out to be very favorable on a very hot London marathon.
Absolutely.
Um, and two, it kind of just took all of I never really felt the pressure for the London Marathon. I felt it for the Ironman because I was desperate to achieve that goal. The London Marathon was kind of like just a cherry on top. And yeah, I was dying to get a sub 3, but I didn't really expect it to happen. And with the poor prep, I was like, it's going to be super tough. And so it just took all the pressure off me, and I just felt very relaxed.
So talk us through the day through the marathon then.
Well, conveniently, the other bit of luck was I was on holiday a few weeks before I was in San Francisco in Abu Dhabi, which was
I was going to talk about that.
stupidly
Actually. I've
hot.
actually got that on my sheet. Talk about the Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, yeah. I did two long runs in Abu Dhabi, and my God, it was I don't even know what it was. It was like mid 30s by 9 a.m. and I was hiding under canopies and asking security guards for water. And so that again really helped me on the day because I just, for everyone else, London was like, oh, it was crazy hot. I actually didn't notice. I actually thought it was just decent conditions. But um,
But there's
yeah.
more of that when we come to the half Ironman that you did. But we'll come to that in a
Oh, yeah, I forgot
minute.
about
So I
that.
think, but I think,
Oh,
funny
wow.
enough, that those things actually, there's been a few things in your lead up, I think, that have really helped, and that they were sort of accidental. You're in Abu Dhabi doing these long runs, and you messaged me like, "This is brutal," and we said, we're like, I think that's gonna, it's really gonna help you out. And then, and actually, it sort of did. And like I say, we'll get to the dreaded half Ironman that you did in a bit. But
Yeah.
talk us through your London experience.
Um, it was just, one of those days. It all kind of went well for me, which was great. You really helped me with the nutrition. So, we were very kind of I was very aware of what I was planning on doing. I'd previously not really taken gels, but I'd introduced gels into my life and was having a pretty strict cadence of taking them throughout. The nutrition in the morning and the week leading up, it all, if nothing else, the placebo effect made me feel more prepared, even though we know that I would have been more prepared than not having that nutrition plan. But turned up on the day and, off I went. And, immediately first K in, I was like, wow, I feel good. And I was looking at my watch and I was trying to run, I think at 4:15 pace per kilometer. And I looked down and I was running at like 4:05. And I was like, okay, this is adrenaline, calm down, just, don't go over the top. But then, second, third K, I was still substantially above pace, but feeling really, really good. And then the fourth K in London Marathon is a sharp downhill, which my brother told me about. I didn't know beforehand. So he's like, you're going to make some time up on the fourth K. So I got about 5K in and I'd already made, nearly a minute buffer on my kind of recommended pace. And I just thought, all right, calm down and just keep going and see how you do. And honestly, I just kept going. I never got to the point that I felt that I wasn't in a controlled pace. And I honestly think, other than when I was going through Canary Wharf, and I think my GPS went doolally, and it said that I had just lost 30 seconds in a kilometer, and I panicked, and I was like, oh my God, how must be, my legs have gone, and I just don't realize, and then it recouped, but I had a bit of a weird couple of K, but otherwise I felt very controlled. I stuck to the nutrition plan. I essentially stuck to the pacing plan, but just a little, 10% higher. The weather didn't affect me so much because I was lucky with the training, and I just tried to stay hydrated. And yeah, I ended up, we were shooting for best, day would be 2 hours, 59 minutes, 59 seconds. And I ended up getting 2 hours, 54, which was genuinely like much better than I thought. I really thought I was going to get 3:10 to 3:8, 3:7, something like that. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think it was, I didn't have a magic recipe. I think I was just, I trained very specifically to your plan. I followed all of your guidance and it went well on the day.
And that sort of leads us into the Ironman. And I just to sort of carry on the conversation about nutrition. I've said it before in other podcasts. For things like this, you need to practice these things and you need to work out what you can get on board. And I think after the marathon, then it did take us a little bit of time and a bit of push and pull. But actually, in the lead up to the Ironman, anyway, it takes a little bit of time to work that sort of nutrition out as well, right? To get a plan because you'll look at research and it will say you need to have this amount of carbohydrate per hour, and it's fairly sort of binary in that way. But actually, it's very individual, and actually, a lot of people can take more on. Some people can take less on. Some people can't cope with gels. Some people, some people like a peanut butter bagel. Some people like bananas. Some people like a mix of all three. And I think that's a really important point before we move on to the Ironman is that if you are going to do this sort of stuff, make sure you get some nutritional advice or you have a plan Because when you're doing long distance endurance stuff, by the time you get to the end, if you haven't had that plan and you haven't got it right, you're just going to hit the wall and you're going to bomb.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't experience that so much in the marathon training, but when I started to get on the bike and then kind of mix up bike with running training, it became, and I remember talking about it, it became clear I couldn't survive on gels, and I needed like actual substance. And so I was the guy that had, peanut butter bagels, ham and cheese sandwiches, bananas, protein bars, all in my bike pockets. And I had to consume it. I had a couple of really bad bike rides because I was just flat. I was empty. And then we realized, like, let's actually get some food in you, and it made all the difference.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so again, I don't really want to go sort of too much into the Ironman training, but we were sticking really to sort of 4 times a week, weren't we, with sort of intermittent long days, which we discussed. But again, just with that caveat that you're a fit guy and you've done this sort of stuff before. So actually you can cope with that, whereas other people maybe wouldn't have to. So as it got a little bit closer, we had to do the half Ironman. And at this time you didn't actually have a bike. So or you did have a bike.
I had an old bike,
You
yeah.
had an old bike. So I said, well, I said to Simon, look, we have to get this half Ironman done like in the next 2 weeks. So anyway, as you know, as he said, if he gets told to do something, he will do something. And do you want to just tell people about what that looked like, that half Ironman?
Yeah, it was a rude awakening. And I just went out and did it on my own around my house. So went down to the Lido, did the swim, got on the bike, went around the Surrey Hills, and then ran. I live just outside Guildford, so running around. It's quite hilly here, so running around, this area. As always, I picked the hottest day of the year, so it was again savagely hot. Um, and I miscalculated the nutrition. And this is your point, right? It's perfect practice. And had that been game day, we would have had a big problem. But it was a walkthrough, and so it ended, or not ended, it nearly ended. On the run, I had a big hill up to my house, and then you go up the hill, and then you've got like a kilometer back to my house. So I was essentially in the last kilometer of the half iron, and I kind of stumbled crossing a road on the curb, and as I planted my leg, it just sent my left leg hamstring into cramp, which caused me to obviously like jump and land on my right leg, which sent my right hamstring into cramp. So then I ended up on the floor, which sent my left calf into cramp. So I was cramping up into three places in front of these two like 15-year-old kids who didn't know what was going on. I had my legs up the wall, lying on the pavement. I couldn't move. Every time I tried to move, everything just cramped up again. Eventually, I rolled onto my front and tried to get up, and I had to go down again because I was cramping. This car stopped. The guy got out. He's like, "You okay?" Thinking I was having a heart attack, which I wasn't. But he was like, "Look, my wife's in the car. She's a runner. She knows what's going on here." So they came and gave me some water. I got back up and I kind of stumbled back home and made it. But I remember messaging you after that saying there is no way I could have done, another couple of K, let alone double the whole thing. So it really kind of put us into, all right, what do we need to do?
Yeah, yeah, and that's it. And I think I mean, look, you were on a terrible bike. It wasn't particularly good preparation. Um, but at the same time, again, sometimes it wasn't a failure as such, but it sort of refocuses your mind, and it's stuff that's just got to be done, and mistakes will be made, and then but you get to a point then when, as we'll come on to now, the Ironman happens and it all goes fantastic because you've done those things and you've tried things, you've failed at things, and then you've worked them out on the way. So look, I want to get into the Ironman because I know you haven't got a huge amount of time left. Do you want to just talk us through the day, the lead up, the day, how the race went, and then when we got through that, we'll just talk about sort of any advice you got for people who are thinking about doing such a thing.
Yeah, just one note actually I forgot to say, which goes back to the marathon, but also applies to anything else. We focused a little bit on strength and conditioning, which I'd never really done before. I'd always think, I'd do 4 runs a week, tempo, progressive, long and slow, whatever, mix up the runs. And I never really did the strength and conditioning. And we made sure we had at least one of those sessions a week in the marathon prep, which would take away, because I couldn't just add it, it would take away one of the other running sessions. And I thought, is this going to help me from a speed perspective? I never felt stronger. That was a big thing in the run. Sometimes you run, you're like, oh, this is a terror. I feel really weak. I feel heavy. I felt when I started the marathon and leading up to it, like muscular strength that I hadn't before. And for me, that was a massive difference. I just felt my legs could take more. And I think it was that kind of acute work on the smaller muscles that prevented the injuries coming back. Because, as I said, we started with all these injuries. They all went and they haven't returned, touch wood. And I think a lot of that is the strength and conditioning.
Yeah, I mean, but you said we were doing one. I mean, that was really at the end stage, wasn't it? Before that, we were doing two a week, wasn't it? Monday, Thursday, I think, and then there was a longish or a long, depending on the sort of time you had, and then we had a shorter session, and that was it. But we did have a big focus on the strength because I think that's where you were lacking. You weren't really lacking in the running. Now, if someone came to me and they were, ex-rugby player, super strong, and the gym work, they didn't need that much. And that's where things become individual. For that person, for the rugby player, for the strong guy, you would move away from the strength. They have that already. I think for
Yeah.
you, it's completely the other end of the spectrum. And I think that's why things need to be individual. It's right. What are you good at the moment? What do you need help with? Right. We actually need to focus on that. And a lot of the time with runners, it's really difficult conversation. That is like, it's like they say I have to be running this amount of times a week. I'm like, yeah, but you can do that. But to start off with, we need to block this. It's first block, this is what we're doing. Second block, this is what we're doing. And then we get you to that point because at the moment that's not working. And it's taking a bit of a step back. And generally this is what I do with a lot of people. I always sort of try and say this is you almost need to look at it from outside of your circle and just take a step back and say, right, what you're doing isn't working. Why? And then you think, what do we need to do to solve it? And it's not forever. It's just we're going to solve this problem, then we're going to solve this problem, then we're going to rebuild this back in, then we're back to where we are. And sometimes I
Yeah.
think it's that shift, isn't it? It's that mindset shift of changing what you're doing and being okay with it. And like you say, and all runners are the same. It's a difficult conversation, but you start to see that when you start to see the difference, feel the difference. It's huge.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing for me was the mental side of it. And so um a friend of mine did a half iron many, many years ago, and I was like, 5.5 hours. There's just no way I'm going to be able to do 5.5 hours, let alone, double or triple or whatever it is to do a full Ironman. And it was shifting my mentality to being able to, compartmentalize things, I guess, and break it down bit by bit, to be able to kind of like achieve the goal. And soon enough, you're doing 2 hour training sessions that felt unreachable, 3 hour, 4 hour. And if you look at my Strava for the training, it's all running up until April, and then it was only May until August that it was swimming and bike. But leading up to it, I was like, there's no way I'd be able to do it unless I do, 100 bike rides. And it wasn't the case. It was just doing it in blocks and doing it smart.
Yeah.
But anyway, to your question, yeah, so I did Kalmar in Sweden for the Ironman, and it's been voted the best Ironman. I think a lot because of the atmosphere, and it's a beautiful place, etc. It's also flat, which was nice, but they don't tell you about the wind. The wind is absolutely brutal on the bike, but um, it was. everything I had hoped it to be. You know, it's a small place. You get there a few days early, and then you register, and there's the, like the camp area. You got to go to all these kind of briefings and things like that. You get a wristband. Everybody there knows that someone wearing a wristband is going to be doing the Ironman. So you get a lot of people saying good luck randomly on the street and stuff like that. So there's a really nice energy, and it just feels like you're part of something, which I hadn't been for quite a while. And so we got there on the Wednesday, excuse me, and the event was on Saturday. So, one or two very short loosener runs, just get used to the place, nutrition,
Try and find some bagels.
get some bagel. Yeah, that was an absolute nightmare the night before trying to find bagels because I couldn't find them anywhere. Along with rice pudding, which is my now thing I have to have before a big event. And yeah, it was just great. Like you go down and drop your bike off and get it all ready, and in the morning of you're down like really early, 5 o'clock in the morning. Um, I just felt prepped. I had everything I needed. And again, I was nervous because I was worried that I might not complete the whole thing, and that was going to be a big problem for me because I didn't want to have to train loads more to do it again. And but other than that, I wasn't stressed about a time. I didn't really care about the time. I just wanted to get it done. So that was kind of like my mindset. Just get it done. Don't worry about it. It can take as long as it takes. Just get it done.
But but it went
But it went better than I thought. Yeah. So I didn't know what was a time I should be shooting for, but one of my best mates, who I told years ago I wanted to do an Ironman, went and did an Ironman, and a couple more before I did. So he's always, rubbed that in my face. And one of them, his best was 11 and a half hours. And so I was like, there's just no way I could do that. So in my head, I was like, if I could get 11 something, I would be ecstatic. And if there was ever a world that I could beat 11 and a half and beat him, yeah, it's just unreachable, but that was like pipe dream. And then I ended up doing 10 hours and 45, which was, yeah, beyond expectation. So it's, yeah, very good. Another good day.
another good day. All right, we've only got a few. I'm conscious you've got to jump off in a minute, but crossing the line, how was it?
It was very good. They got the bell, the first timer bell, the red carpet, the big archway and the announcer, and they call every runner that comes in. So they see your number and they go, Simon Winchester, you are an Iron Man as you cross the line. And there's they always have like a little, little stadium thing with spectators. So it felt amazing. I'd wanted to do it for 10, 15 years. I've been training really hard for the last 18 months, albeit, part recovery, part marathon, part Ironman, but very disciplined training for about 18 months. And it was just a tick in the box. So I was very proud. I got the medal and I'm glad it's done.
So you should be. I was sitting in Portugal the whole day. I was in Portugal on holiday, first day of holiday in the pub, and my father-in-law was watching the Tottenham game, and I was on my phone. He's like, "God, you're always on your phone." I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to be watching this most of the day." And then he went off, and I stayed sat in the pub just watching till you finished because yeah, you were on for a good time. I was like, "Oh my God." Anyway, right, last question for you. If you were going to give someone like yourself, kids, busy job, two or three bits of advice about what it takes to do it, or what you would, just advise them on what they should do. Three best bits of advice for doing an Ironman in your position.
Yeah, so I mean the communication bit, as I said, do that. Organize your life and avoid stress because that's just going to ruin it for everyone. Um, I think the other thing is what I was trying to allude to earlier. Just do not overthink it. It seems like it's a incredible, it's an out of reach goal. I thought a sub 3 hour marathon was out of reach. I thought completing the Ironman would be incredibly difficult, let alone getting the time that I ended up getting, which I was very proud of. And then maybe it's another one, but I did the 100-mile ultra, and it was completely stupid out of reach, but I just broke it down to segments. Just do the next training session. And that was again the benefit of having you. I didn't have to map it out all myself. It was just do the next training session. And bit by bit, you just get the incremental growth and don't think about the 6 hours on the bike followed by the marathon or the swim that everyone's scared of, and how difficult it's going to be. It's all very manageable and all very achievable when you break it down into the small segments. And so, yeah, communication, don't overthink it. You'll be there before you know it. And probably the third one is, yeah, nutrition. Get that right. And it's like having, a second engine.
Mate, that's awesome. Well, that's what I like to help people do. Redefine your limits.
Yeah. Yeah, now I sit here thinking, maybe an Ironman's not that tough. Maybe I should do like a double Ironman or something. So I don't know what I'm going to do next,
You
but yeah,
brushed over it very briefly a minute ago, but after the Ironman, you did do a 100-mile ultra run as well on very short notice. Um, but maybe this episode is about the Ironman, so we'll just leave it there, mate.
yeah.
That was
And
great. Oh, sorry, God.
just as last comment, in no way am I saying an Ironman is easy and look at me. It's tough, but I'm just saying that it's very it's we're a crazy species. We can push our limits without realizing it, and before you know it, it'll be achievable and a goal. So a goal that you've secured. So yeah, that's what I meant.
Awesome, mate. I appreciate your time. Super interesting, mate. I was a proud coach as well when you did it, and
Oh,
onwards and
thank
upwards.
you. Yeah, thank you so much for your support. I couldn't have done it without you. So looking forward to the next thing.
All right, mate. All right. Well, have a great weekend, and I will speak to you soon.
All right, take care. Cheers. Thank you.